full 24-hour bedtime. It's like throwing bottles. First one, don't throw the new one. I'm not the new wife.
And I'm also joined today by Martin Kingman, who I would describe as a friend, who has some interesting history. And currently, would it be fair to say you currently work mostly in debt chasing?
Yeah, mainly.
Shall we start there? Because obviously we're in some austere times, and I, for one, have a fairly large amount of debt I would quite like to collect quickly.
Most people do, yep.
Are there any tips or?
First of all, probably know your clients is the age-old one. Make sure you've got credit checks done of who you're actually offering credit to. So the word credit comes from the Roman word for trust. So if you didn't know that, credia is the word for trust. And obviously you are actually trusting somebody to pay you back. Most of you probably don't run banks, so therefore you need to be quite limited with actually loaning money.
He does.
Free of charge. Yeah, he won't do it free of charge though, you know. So you guys are much better banks if you're one of those sort of people who's not inclined to pay bills, because you give free credit and don't charge interest on it. So it's worthwhile actually sort of putting limits in place to actually what people can actually afford to pay, and keep monitoring those, because things do change. You know, the world's a very changeable place at the moment. Inflation's doing all sorts of things to the market as well. And then it comes back to actually being on top of your numbers. So actually looking at what people are actually owing you, opening up dialogue early. When you send an invoice, follow up a couple of days later, have you received it? Is there any issues? Record it in writing. Writing is king for the courts. You know, it's on the phone's fine, even if you're on the phone quicker. You know, in Xero, got a little notes bottom. At the bottom of the page, you can actually record the notes of what has been said and when and what was promised. And then have a sort of credit control process where a couple of chase letters that are getting a little bit stronger, you know, from the please would you mind awfully to the, you know, I must now insist. I'm not going to use the words I used earlier. I'm in polite company on record.
Pay up or I repossess the wife.
Yeah, no, it's a something-ogram. Yeah, beginning SH1T-ogram, as we call it, to actually get the money. And literally just stop that process and then just have that system in place to just keep banging that out. Use Xero if you're using Xero or any other accounts with the automated chases as well, so it's actually chasing when you're not there.
Well, that's it, and that is the communication. If they don't come back and complain, they're sort of agreeing the debt.
Exactly.
So, actually, I'm going to do something. Any questions on debt collection? Because I think this debt collection is quite dry and we can move on from it quite quickly.
I'll be asleep in 5 minutes if you're not. So.
Have you seen a rise in it in the last 6 months or so?
Yes, but there's a big rise in we don't have the ability to pay now. I was talking earlier about when we went into COVID, we were thinking, oh, okay, this is going to be massive. We're going to be really, really busy. And then, of course, the government went, oh, have loads of money, have bounce backs, have C-bills, grants, etc. And, of course, there was loads of money flowing. We saw quite a big intake then of chasing money, but people had the money, they were just trying to keep hold of it. At the moment, we're seeing that same stockpile again, because people are worried about inflation, they're worried about costs, and people are saying, okay, let's string out our costs and as long as possible, pay on the last possible minute. Only when things start to get really heavy are we actually going to do that. And it's an alternative means to using the banks. You know, it's effectively free credit rather than actually having to go and get an overdraft and borrow money, you know, and pay a percentage on it. So yes, we have seen an increase in it, and my prediction is it will get worse. And it is the age-old thing with debt recovery. He who shouts loudest gets paid. You know, we use what we call the buggerance factor. You know, I will make myself an absolute pain in somebody's backside to get paid. You know, just keep battering and battering and battering, and they just pay me to go away. On a proactive side, what's really useful is if you've got particular key clients and suppliers, get to know the people who are paying you in the credit teams. Go in at Christmas with a box of chocolates can make a massive amount of difference. Ridiculous, I know. Build up that rapport when things are not too bad, and actually they like you and prefer you, and the person who's actually paying the bill in the finance team will actually effectively do a preference and pay you in advance of other people's. Now, preferences we can come on to talk about insolvency, but that's only a problem if you become insolvent, but we'll leave that for another day.
No, I always find it interesting that the people who want to stretch out paying you are the ones who want paying quickly.
Oh, always.
Because you sort, because I find I've got customers and suppliers and the same people. They go, you've got to pay me now, but I'm not paying you for 120 days. I mean, at which point I say, let's just work a contra.
Absolutely, and deals are always good. You know, if you're going to get cash, you know, cash is king. You know.
let's go backwards because you've got a rather interesting hobby I quite like.
Okay. Oh, you meant search and rescue. Oh, not that one. Okay. God, I thought you found out for a minute. I thought it was internet pictures or something.
Oh, I've been speaking to Sarah.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to. No, I'm a trustee and search manager for Kent Search and Rescue. We are a charity that work alongside Kent Police and Kent Fire and Rescue, looking for high-risk missing people, mainly in the county of Kent. Have been to Surrey before. We've been to Hampshire. We've done numerous mutual aid jobs in other counties as well. But how many people do you think go missing in Kent on an average year? Let's have a bit of audience participation here.
I'll tell you what.
5,000.
Keep going. More than 5,000. More than 5,000. Keep going.
7?
More than 7. What, 7,000? Yeah, more than 7,000. Okay. About 10,000. Two years ago, it was 9,887, I think it was. So there's almost 10,000 people go missing in Kent every year. Roughly. What was that? Yeah. I don't know where to find all the bodies. But of that, around about 10% are deemed to be high risk. And as search and rescue, we only deal with high risk. There's a lot of people who go missing who choose to go missing. There's a lot of absconders from care. They've now got specialist teams called MSET, Missing Child Exploitation teams, who actually deal with just missing children and stuff like that, who run away from care homes, and they are the frequent flyers who go 3 times a week, 4 times a week, because they're very disturbed and unhappy. We used to deal with mainly dementia. Our stock in trade used to be sort of dementia. They'd go wandering. They love linear features, straight lines, just keep going till they can't stop. That was about 80% of our trade when I started in 2015, 2016. Now, unfortunately, it's now despondent and suicidal is now 80% and 20%, so that flip has totally flipped on its head. Mental health is being talked about a hell of a lot more than it has done over the last 5 years or so, which is great, but there's still a massive issue. COVID and prices and Brexit and everything else, all the pressures that we're all living under. Some people think it's as somebody explained to me the other day, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. But we are seeing lots and lots, not just males, it is females as well. We probably deal with about 70% males, 70-30 on the split. But yeah, so we go out in all hours of the day and night on behalf of Kent Police and look and find them, hopefully.
And on those numbers, you get an average call out of 2 to 3 a day.
No, because we only get around about 80 call-outs a year, because the police will find those others, or there'll be investigative work for them to do before we get called. Yeah. We have to have a sort of defined search area. So if we know somebody's gone missing in a car, well, good luck, I can't go and search the whole of Kent. We're not going to go out looking for number plates on a car. We have been asked before and I've said no. But we've got a car parked in a remote location, fine. We'll do what we call the 300 metres around that. 50% of all missing people are found within that 300 metres, statistically. And everything we do is based on statistics. So as macabre as it is, there is various stats out there that actually will tell you if you are a male between 18 and 37, for example, I can tell you that you're 37% likely to hang if you're despondent. You're 36% likely to drown. And it's interesting, look at these stats, actually males choose more violent means and women generally choose less violent means of death. But there are exceptions. And we've had, over the years, we've had everything from hanging and drowning around normal ones, but we occasionally get some other nasty ones as well.
Yes, Martin knows I used to do life-saving, and we patrolled rivers and the sea, so we have our fair share of nasty ones as well. So is there much, you mentioned the interaction with the police, interaction with any other agencies? Yeah,
we work with Kent Fire and Rescue. As a charity, Mark Rist, who's the most senior uniformed fire officer in Kent, is one of our trustees. We've also got the Deputy Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner's Chief Exec, who are trustees, so we've got engagement at that level as well, which is brilliant. Work alongside Matt Pavitt and the team at the Coast Guard. So yeah, we do a lot of what is called JESSOP, for any of those who are aware, Joint Emergency Service Interoperability Principles, for actually joint working. I passed that one. I actually remember what it was for the acronym.
You've done well there.
Yeah, especially this time of the morning. But basically that gives us a framework. It came out of the 7/7 bombings to actually for the agencies to work closer together, and we will work together on bigger jobs. Some of you might remember 4 years ago now, 4 years in August, a very sad case of a little boy called Lucas Dobson, who was playing on boats down in Sandwich and managed to fall in the river down in the Stour, a very fast-flowing river, 6 years old. We were called out on the Saturday afternoon for that. We worked alongside the police, the Coast Guard, the Fire Brigade, the HART team, so the Hazards Area Response Team from the ambulance, the lifeboats, and yeah, literally Tom Cobley and all, to be fair. And Lucas was found on the Wednesday morning. I got to go on BBC TV for that. That was most fun. But there we go.
I never get over that. Something tragic has occurred, and there's some bloody reporter with a microphone going, "Oh, can you tell us what happened?"
And Monday morning, I turned up. I'd actually been away for the weekend, and I'd been away on the Saturday. I'd run a job on the Sunday because we had another search and rescue job while this other one was going on. It's always the way, you know. And I'd run that job from the office in Rochester as it was then. Turned up on the Monday morning as the duty manager for the week. Got the handover of what's been going on, and then it's like, right, okay, the BBC want to interview you. Okay, great. And the first thing the woman says, "Oh, have you given up all hope?" You know, you think, how the hell do I answer a question like that, you know? And it's like, no, we're hopeful to bring Lucas back, you know, what can we say, you know? Oh, we'll give up all hope, yeah, we're just going to pack up and go home. It's just a ridiculous question, but they're just all the time trying to trip you up into, you know, something sensationalist to actually give them a soundbite. The worst thing was I hadn't seen what the Assistant Chief Constable had said the day before because I'd been on this other search, and she said that hope is fading. So it was literally trying to decide to trip us up between what the Assistant Chief Constable had said and what we had said. But luckily I sort of dodged a bullet, which I'm not bad at doing. It's a litigator in me that means
I was going to say
I'm normally okay on my feet.
That's interesting because you're based in Kent, which gives you geographical borders. And you know what happens if you get to a geographical border?
We've had missing people going missing from Margate, and we've done live cell phone traces and called them and bits and bobs. And we have a bit of kit called a locate me text, so we can literally send a text message to any mobile phone number, and you just click on it and say yes, I'm okay, and it will tell us where you are. You have to consent to it for GDPR and whatever. And we sent this text one particular day, and the woman ended up, she apparently didn't have a passport. No money, no means of travel. She was at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, which was, was a sort of a fascinating one. So we've got plans. We've had plans in place in relation to the migrants as well, because obviously there's lots of migrants coming across on boats. We won't touch the sea. Our boats, we've got boats, we've got kayaks, we've got rafts, we've got an underwater sonar, and we've also got a new underwater drone, which is quite a lot of fun. But literally goes down and it's got a robotic arm on it, can actually grab hold. That sort of new technology, it's coming on at a fast rate of knots. We've got normal drones, so all-weather drones, and a whole raft of other kit as well, bikes, foot teams, dogs, all sorts.
So, obviously, well, where are we now? We're in Surrey, because I live in Hampshire. And Surrey has got its own version.
Surrey have got their own search and rescue. No, Surrey search and rescue well.
And Hampshire have got their own version, albeit they seem a lot toned down to yours.
Yeah, Kent is probably one of the more advanced teams. We've got about 100 members, which is one of the biggest. Apart from Northern Ireland, who they've got a semi-professional team. They've got 3 full-time employees, I think, now. And they do about 3 times the amount of calls we do. We are the most called-out team nationally. We're all part of a national framework called Lowland Rescue, and we have this sort of interoperability where if Surrey have got a decent job on, my second ever search I ever did was actually in Surrey. I came on as mutual aid, and we love that because Surrey had a link with Domino's Pizzas, so you know you're going to turn up and actually get pizza at the search. I was there.
You don't like your food, do you?
Yeah, so I was there. You know, you had me at Dom. You know, that was enough.
You have the build of somebody who doesn't
exactly.
like food.
Yeah, that's it. It's all there for warmth. Cold nights.
I was going to say, it's there for protection.
Exactly.
So let's go back, because obviously you grew up as a young man. Where did all this start?
I've never grown up. I try not to grow up. It's optional. My parents live at Cliff, which is a really small village in north of Rochester. Some of you may have heard of Rochester. Cliff is famed for 2 things. It's got the largest parish church in England. Used to be a really important town. It was a port, and then they drained the marshes. So now Wolf Lane, that used to be a wharf, is now about 3/4 of a mile from the river. And it was the last place in England to have malaria and mosquitoes in 1957. Okay, so that's sort of 2 interesting facts about Cliff, which gives you a sort of an idea of the sort of place it is. It's not exactly a busy town these days. It's a little village of about 2,000 people. Conventional childhood, very conventional. My dad was a special constable, so he was volunteer and he had his own business. My mum's a haematologist and worked in the local hospital and did that for 40 odd years. I did the scouts, did the normal sort of thing. I was in the choir, if you can believe that. I know, Angel.
Angel?
Yeah, no, so I've gone from, angel to hell. There we go. That's I've become a lawyer, so that's sold my soul to the devil apparently. But no, that's very, very boring, Paul. To be fair.
It's not, I'm sure it wasn't boring.
Well, boring, but very conventional. Okay.
So, what business did your dad have?
My dad was an insurance broker. Looking at Clive. So yeah.
Great fella he must have been.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah. He sold the business. Direct Line came along in the 90s, and to be fair, private lines insurance brokerage was decimated by sort of people going direct to the insurance companies and not realising the value of a broker, which of course we know how valuable brokers are, of course.
I'll have my commission later, Clive.
Yeah, so we'll all have it. We'll all have a commission later. And effectively, he then went into doing sort of odds and sods, and he actually does a lot of undertaking, which is that's very fascinating for me. As people keep telling me, they are the last people to let you down. There we go. Yeah. Oh, it's got quite a good reception. That one wasn't.
I was going to say you're doing all right.
That wasn't bad. Yeah. Okay.
We'll employ you for stand-up, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's interesting because our speakers seem to be split roughly 50% of those who went to university and 50% of those who didn't.
No, didn't go to university. When I was trying to grow up, I decided that I wanted to be a stockbroker. I have absolutely no idea why, but I love the idea of working on the life markets, so the tit-tat and all that, when it used to be open floor, and was on for very, very good A-level grades. And I then met my former wife, right around the middle of my A-levels. She was older than me, and I literally then had no interest whatsoever in any of my A-level subjects. It was just practical biology from then on. I'm not explaining them, okay? And effectively, I literally scraped through with, in fact, do I admit this publicly on film?
You don't have to.
3.5 E's I got for A-level. So having mock A's and B's at A-level, it's a massive sort of, I just can't be asked. That was literally, I just couldn't be bothered about anything. I didn't do any of the coursework I was meant to do apart from one thing for history, my individual study, which I got a B for, and I really flunked the exam, which gave me an overall E grade.
But this is interesting because I would say when you're not a dissimilar age to me. I know he's younger, but not by much. Yeah, I did better than you did at school, but I was never motivated by it. So at some point, something must have motivated you.
I've always been interested in business, always been interested in sort of commerce, and I wouldn't say I was sort of Del Boy wheeler dealer. I wasn't sort of selling stuff at school and sort of doing that sort of thing, but I was always interested by it. When I grew up, Lord Hanson was a great role model. I love what he was doing in terms of going to a business, asset stripping it, and then selling off the constituent parts for more money than he bought the whole thing for. And I was always sort of in awe of that, which is quite a strange role model to have when you're sort of 12, 13 years old. You've got a 60-year-old tall man who drives around in the Rolls Royce who's friends with Maggie Thatcher. And what happened was, because I'm about half, she ran a restaurant. So I then went from wanting to be a stockbroker to I'm going to be a chef. And I was working part-time in this restaurant, and I then went off to Westminster Catering College, and I did 6 weeks. The whole 6 weeks at Westminster Catering College. The only thing I attained there was a food hygiene certificate. And I was an HND in Hotel Catering Institutional Management. And it still wonders me now, what the hell is institutional management? But the chef who was working in the restaurant was in the TA, he got sent to Bosnia, and they then offered me the job. And literally I then went and lived in the restaurant because my mum wasn't very happy that I was seeing a 37-year-old woman when I was 17. It doesn't go down that well. Hey ho, that's part of life's rich tapestry. So I moved in the restaurant, and Vanessa and I were together until last year, 25 years. So it lasted a long time. In 2000, the restaurant closed because the guy who owned it, he lived in Spain, wanted us to buy it. I was 20 years old, and it was 180,000 at that point, which 23 years ago was actually an incredible lot of money. I was earning about 100 quid a week, I think, because we were living in the restaurant. So it was like, not ever going to get a mortgage. There's no bank in the world is ever going to loan me anywhere near enough to buy it. So we were literally homeless and jobless within a few months. And I had a job for 9 months that my mum came up trumps. Good old mum, bless her.
Forgave you in the end then?
She forgave me in the end. She worked at Melbourne Hospital as a haematologist, and they had a job going for a porter, and she phoned me and said, "You need to come in this afternoon, put a suit on." I don't think I've even got a suit. And I remember going and actually borrowing my dad's, and I wore this red jacket. Christ, I don't know why, but this sort of furry red jacket thing to this interview.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds sort of thing you would wear. Yeah, it sort of looked like I got dressed in the dark by Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, but it was this hilarious jacket, and I got the job as a pathology porter, which was absolutely brilliant because it gave me such a grounding for doing literally the worst jobs you can imagine. Now, a pathology porter sounds quite interesting. It had a job, and literally, and I make people laugh with this, but it's actually true. I had a job taking the piss. Literally, we used to get all the body fluids, blood, spit, semen, fecal, everything you could imagine. Anything comes out of the body, I would get and have to move on a trolley around the different departments, because at the time the 5 different departments were in different areas of the hospital. So I literally had a job taking the piss for 9 months. And I used to have to do things like clean the autoclave machine. So in microbiology, if you get something wrong with you, and they take a swab, they get an agar petri dish, swipe it on there, put it in an incubator to see what grows, and whatever grows then tells them what you've got. Once they've used that then goes into a big bin, into an autoclave machine, gets steamed at 900 degrees to make it sterile, and then that gets emptied into hazardous waste and then burnt. I had the job of literally unloading this stuff. It was awful, absolutely horrific, stunk to high heaven. But gave me such a great grounding in just remaining to be feet on the ground and, remember where you come from. So, yeah, that was my real grounding, if you like.
So what happened next?
So one of the ladies I worked with, a lady called Ranu, her brother was a lawyer, and I used to teach her son IT. I'm very gadgety, bit of an IT freak, and was born just at the right time. So I had my first computer when I was 5. I had my first PC for my 9th Christmas. And Boxing Day, Mum and Dad came down to find me having the lid off, screwdriver in it. It's in bits on the kitchen table. That's also another way to make your mum go apoplectic, by the way. If there's £1,000 worth of computer and I've got a screwdriver in it, working out how it works. That's what I do. So I was very sort of IT literate, and I was teaching her son IT, and he's like, "Oh, you're wasted at the hospital. I'll get you a job in our IT department in a law firm." And it's a very old law firm, in fact, the oldest firm in England, called Thompson, Son and Passmore. And they literally wouldn't allow me to go and work in the IT department because I didn't have industry experience. And he quite rightfully said, well, if he hasn't got industry experience, he's never going to get any, if nobody's going to give him a chance. They were insistent they weren't going to give me a job, and he was incensed by that, so he created the job for me as his assistant. He said, well, I could do with some help, I'll give you a job. So literally, that's how I fell into law. And they said, if you work hard, we'll put you on a thing called a legal executive course, which is basically equivalent to an apprenticeship. So rather than getting a law degree, doing a legal practice course, and then having a training contract, you literally do exams for, I don't know, 6.5 years, every 6 months. Every waking moment you're not working, you're studying. Very, very hard way to do stuff, but in my life I've generally chosen the hard way to do stuff. I've got a lot of natural ability, and I generally quite often don't use it, and end up having to do the hard yards. So
I'm trying hard to not to look at you and think of myself for this joke.
yeah, it's one of those, but actually, again, gave me great commercial grounding, and that's that stood me in such brilliant stead, because so many times I meet lawyers who are not at all practical. They're very, very theoretical, and they've gone and read it in a book, but actually, you're not interested. You're not interested in theoretical laws. As clients of ours, you come to us. You want us to know the law, that's right. You want us to apply the legal principles. You don't give a monkeys about that. You want the result you want. And you want us to give you the result you want and actually give you the advice you need. And that sometimes it's always the advice you want, but it is the advice you need. And that practical sense has always been with me. I've always been very sort of hands-on.
So do you find you get cases where you go, sorry, I can't help you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I get that a lot. And this is the result I want, can you do it? And you just have to go, no.
I had a phone call yesterday. The guy's an accountant based in London.
Shocking accountant. Yeah,
deals with he's a creative side. He's been dealing with a company in Italy, and he says it's a 20,000 euro debt. They're about to go into insolvency. And I said, look, I just don't think you should bother. it's almost certain we won't be able to make a difference by the time we even get anything through the courts here. And there's a whole process. Now we're out of Europe, there's a whole different process to registering judgments overseas, and we do a lot of international collections. I said, you're just wasting good money after bad. And the easiest way to double your money, Paul, do you know this? Fold it in half and put it back in your wallet. Yeah, that's the only way you can double your money. But that, you know, that's one of those things where I give advice people don't like, but it is the right advice, and if it's right for the client, that is what's right. It isn't just about us making a quick buck, and our whole business model is built upon long-term objectives.
Fantastic. That's interesting. You think this is just sort of a conversation, but you notice somewhat skillfully we've come full circle back to where we started.
Almost.
That's very good, isn't it?
It's not bad at all. Not bad at all.
It's almost like we know what we're doing.
Exactly.
So, I mean, is it fair to say that you concentrate on sort of debt collection and insolvency, or what, do you do any other areas of law?
So insolvency is my love. It's one of those things where there are very few actual real insolvency lawyers. We were speaking to somebody earlier about statutory demands, and a lot of lawyers say, oh, yeah, we do stat demands, we're insolvency lawyers, which a bit like, you know, I know how to change the windscreen washers on my car, doesn't make me a mechanic. You know, it's that sort of, if you know how to do an engine change and change the gearbox, you know how to become a mechanic, and it's very the same with insolvency. So I now run the group, so this year we've actually developed out into a group, and what happened was, I did 5 years, 6 years at Thompson Snell. I got headhunted to another law firm to run their debt recovery business. That was just before the 07 recession, 07-08 recession. Brilliant time to be involved in running a debt recovery team, because your figures go like that, whatever happens. You know, you can be crap and it goes like that. And but we really made hay while the sun shone. And I got, one of my clients was a construction firm who was really struggling in sort of 2009, 2010. And in early 2011, they said, come and work for us in-house. And so that's what I did. So I actually did a turnaround job for insolvency, but rather than paying my hourly rates, they sort of doubled my salary personally and gave me a 9-to-5 job, which is sort of, if you could have created a job, that would have been it. And for 2.5 years, that was bliss, because, you know, I sort of rolled in the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and I'd be gone by 5:30, and that was late. 4:45, you know, you could lit your fags off the hinges of the speed that people were going out the door, and it's one of those where. But that again gave them that commercial reality that you really need. That, of course, the problem with turnaround, I mean, I made 90 people redundant, shut down 5 divisions, put a load of systems in place. That company is now turning over 40 million quid a year. Completely changed what it does. And that gave me a whole load of insight into other areas as well. So I did a lot of compliance work, and that's the reason I'm telling you that story, because I then had all my ex-clients say, do you still do debt recovery? It's like, no, I've left that behind. And I turned down 100 grand of recoveries in a day. Garage, funeral director. I was at a funeral, and the funeral director came up to me afterwards and said, do you still do debt recovery? Because he knew my dad. And I said, no, I don't do it. Oh, that's a shame, because I've got a load of debt. And it was like 100 grand worth of debt, and I'm thinking, this is nuts. I should set a company up, systemise it, and just get the money. It's not... Debt recovery is very, very structured, and it's very straightforward. It's skilled, don't get me wrong, but it's very proceduralised. It's quite easy to do. And I literally, from that moment, had the entrepreneurial seizure, as they call it, and that was it. I set up professional legal collections, debt recovery business. I headhunted my number 2 from my previous firm to come and run it for me. He was meant to be running it. I was meant to be sitting in the background earning money from it without actually doing anything. It's a lovely idea, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you. Unfortunately, you need to make sure you back the right horse if you're going to do that, and unfortunately, I didn't. Alex was a brilliant number 2, and he just couldn't step up. So in 2000, that was 2014, we set it up. In 2016, he exited the business. I then stopped being a consultant doing other stuff and literally went back into it and sort of re-established it and sorted it out. And I had other companies come to me saying, do you do compliance? Because you used to do ISOs, and we used to do a lot of stuff on the rail. Is anybody here does anything on the railways at all? Okay, now a thing called RISCs, Rail Industry Supply Qualification Scheme, where basically there's a whole load of accreditations you have to get and whole criteria you have to meet. It's very similar to legal. There's a framework, you have to meet the criteria, so it sits quite well. And I ended up developing out a compliance arm of the business, doing 9,001 quality, 14,001 environmental, and 45 health and safety, and 27 data security now as well, because of that skill I had in industry. So that became another sort of thing. So last year, what we ended up doing was splitting the companies into a group structure. So I've now got a debt recovery business, professional collections, I've got professional legal compliance, I've got Professional Litigation Company Limited. You'll notice there's a bit of a theme there, PLC, on everything. So Professional Litigation Company is now our SRA registered law firm. I've got Professional Legal Contracts that does contract drafting. And I've also got a company that does payroll. And I've now got PLC IT services that starts at the end of this month as well, doing hardware and software support for IT. And the vision is effectively to become a full service, cradle to grave professional service firm with sort of various partners. I know. Getting heckled.
It's your empties, mate.
At least they're not throwing them, I suppose. Yeah, that makes a change. So my day-to-day work, I spend a lot of time now actually doing the running of the business rather than doing client-facing stuff. But insolvency is still my real love. I love going after naughty directors. It's just a lot of fun.
And I guess looking forward, it's more of the same for the next sort of 5 years.
Very much so. We will spin up other companies. We're going to bring on some HR.
Accountants?
Bookkeepers, accountants, there may well be, you know, so
I can help you with that.
if anyone knows anybody, you know, wants to bring an accounting firm into a group structure, you know, the one real benefit of that for me is it enables me to work with sort of strategic partners who have equity stakes in their respective businesses while I retain overall control within the group. For the IT business, for example, the guy was introduced to me, wanted to set up on his own, was thinking, hello, this is going to be a hell of a lot of cost setting up a new business from scratch, and that's going to be hard yards. We said, well, actually, what we'll do is we'll fund that as part of the group. We use my little black book of networks to actually market what we've got, and then we can actually cross-sell across all of our clients as well. So that's a win-win for us, and it's much easier than trying to do the hard yards on your own. And then the group takes care of all the admin, so that he can literally be focused on doing the doing. So any of you read the E-Myth?
Mr. Gerber.
Mr. Michael Gerber, best-selling business book, 25 years, year-on-year growth on sales. Talks about 3 different people: the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. And literally, this guy can literally be a technician and develop to becoming a manager, managing other people doing technicians. Doesn't need to worry about the leadership and the admin because effectively that's all taken care of. He could just be main focused on that. And actually, what I want from the group is that my guys are client-facing and actually not worried about doing the back-end stuff that's just done for them. We strive with systems to make it as easy as possible to get the work done, because otherwise it gets in the way.
Yeah, you're right. And Gerber's interesting because I would have said when he wrote it, it was relevant, and then it became irrelevant, and now it's probably more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. It's I met him on a Zoom seminar during lockdown, him and Brian Tracy and a few others, and it's absolutely fascinating to hear the guy speak with the amount of passion this guy speaks for a guy who's nearly 80. And Stephen Covey, before he passed, was the same. These guys just revolutionise in what they do, and so yeah, that might be the next thing. Write a book.
Write a book.
Write a book. If only I could write. I've got my best crayons out and everything. But
you may guess he's a bit of a comedian as well. We could sign you up to stand up in the castle one evening.
You never know my luck.
It's been great talking to Martin. Does anyone have any questions for him? Because we've covered quite a lot of ground.
One question. I was just wondering if people go missing all the time because of debt issues. I was wondering if you ever found any customers for your search and rescue.
Not yet, but never say never. We have had. I had a member of staff who's actually got quite traumatised and had to go to some counselling because she had a phone call from a lady who was actually on the wrong side of a barrier on a motorway, and she was saying, "I'm going to end it all." And it's it's because of the pressure you guys have put me under, which wasn't actually legitimate. We'd written a couple of letters. It wasn't particularly bad, but she was in a particularly bad place, and it's like everybody's got a bucket, and at some point, if your bucket overfills, it doesn't matter what it is, it's overfilled the bucket. So not as yet. We haven't found any of them yet, but it'll only be a matter of time, I'm sure. The only problem is now, because I don't have the day-to-day dealings with the debt, I probably won't know, because again, I don't get to sort of look at every single client we have and every single debtor we have. We've got about 2,200 live cases at the moment. So you have to have quite a good memory to try and... Yeah, but the one thing we do have is actually frequent flyers for us with Kent Search and Rescue, where we have all that names come up again. Oh, it's her again or him again. So we've had that a few times. So we try and get preventative things in place, like trackers, especially for dementia and things like that. And there is a thing called an at-risk of going missing form. There's a thing called the Herbert Protocol as well. So if anybody's got any elderly relatives or anybody who's vulnerable, also autistic or anything like that, you can download this at-risk of going missing form, fill in all the details, slow time. You keep hold of it, and if they go missing, give that to us, and it gives us a whole dossier of information. That can be really useful because, again, things like dementia, what happens is obviously people regress back. And the way it's been explained to me is the reason it is that when you have a memory, you leave like a breadcrumb trail almost in your brain. And the more you recall that memory, you recall that it's like another strand, like another thin cotton thread. And therefore, over years, those memories become much thicker into sort of like ropes of that memory. And therefore, things you did 2 minutes ago, you've only got a thing you forget. But this bigger rope, you sort of remember longer, which is why people regress back. I mean, we had a job at Biggin Hill. In fact, it was that Surrey job where the guy was walking towards Biggin Hill Aerodrome because that's where he was stationed in the war. And he thought he was late for service, you know. Very, very sad. And there's been some... We have very black humour, okay? It's not obviously something you make public, but it's like all emergency services, it's how you cope and deal with stuff. But I could tell you quite a funny story we had the other week, probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago in Tunbridge Wells. I'm duty search manager, so I've got overall legal responsibility in the County of Kent for that search. I've got 100 people on the search, or available to me for the search. We'll probably get on any one time 30, 40 people. And we were searching in Canterbury for a despondent male, and he'd been missing 5, 6 days already at this point. And we got another call to Tunbridge Wells for an old boy with dementia, and it was cold. I think it was February time, end of February. So it was like 1 degree outside. It was like, okay, if this boy's been missing 5, 6 days, we're going to suspend that tonight because actually the chances are he's already gone and done what he's gone and done if he's gone and done it. If he's been out for 5, 6 days, that's what it is. This old boy probably won't last the night, so we need to go and do that. And they're difficult calls to make as a manager. So we literally decamp from Canterbury right the way down to Tunbridge Wells, you know, right the way across the county. Get to Tunbridge Wells, we're in the fire station there, we're based behind the fire station, we're set up, teams out looking around the parks, drones up, all this stuff going on. We get a phone call from the police, we think he might be in a hotel in the travel lodge. So myself and a first responder went up there, first responder medic, go into this travel lodge, police cars there as well. We go into this room in the travel lodge, and he's an 85-year-old boy, and he's in bed in the travel lodge. Okay, it's a missing person. First thing is a cross for that, you know. He's not out somewhere in the cold. He's not fallen over in a ditch, and you know, because that's why we do it. We try and save those people, and literally had a conversation with him, and it was brilliant. And you know, it was like, does anybody know where you are? Yeah, my mum and dad know where I am. And it's like, you're 85 years old, but you know, I'm not sure they do because I'll be phoning the Guinness Book of Records. But it was just that, you know, and I was saying to somebody last night about it. It was one of those things whereby he was so convincing. The answers he gave, I'd quite happily put him on a witness stand and cross-examined him, and I'd have believed him. If he told me I left 10 minutes ago, I'd have believed him if I was still standing in front of him. And it was like, yeah, my wife's gone away to Spain. I've been in this hotel 10 days. I always come here. Well, that's interesting because the receipt from the hotel was like an hour and a half ago. You know, oh, the food's brilliant here. It's like, I haven't even got food here, you know. But it was so sort of convincing. But that's sort of the funnier side. The lighter-hearted side of what we do. Obviously, we have the serious stuff as well. And the following day, unfortunately, we did find the young man was found deceased in the woods, which is the yin to the yang. The ones that we save are the ones that we do it for. And we've had a few really good results over the years. We had a woman fall under a bush on the A2. Was under a bush with dementia for 4 days. She couldn't get up, and luckily we found her just before she died, and she made a full recovery in the end. And we had another guy called Dennis Wyard who was in Maidstone, went into a school, and it's really weird because this school has literally 2 train tracks running either side of it, so it literally sits like on an island. And he managed to walk over the bridge and go into the school when the school was open on the Friday afternoon, gone onto the field, gone to the bottom of the field and got stuck in a ditch. We found him on the Wednesday night. Been out literally all weekend. It's horrific. He survived. Again, great stories, and you can't beat that buzz. There's nothing going to replace that. But unfortunately, we do get the yin to the yang, so we get some of that. But they've done what they intended to do, and
We're taking consolation. Searching at sea, the first question is, what are they wearing? And the worst question you ever get is they're wearing blue and white. And it's like, why the blue blazes, aren't they wearing red and yellow?
Yeah, exactly. Something you might be able to spot.
Yeah. So any more questions?
How does your professional work help you with your voluntary work and vice versa?
Effectively, I've built the business to enable me to go out on call-outs whenever I like. So I've got the team around me so that the way it operates is when I'm duty manager, we do a week on call. So we do 6 o'clock Sunday night, 160 hours to the following Sunday night. And during that time as duty manager, you have to go. So you've got a vehicle. We bought a Volvo from Surrey, in fact, at the moment. So our latest wheels is a nice Volvo. And we drive that around, but literally at any time we can be going anywhere in the county. That's particularly tough on the families because, you've got things, dinner, it's a great one that, 10 minutes before you're meant to be home for dinner. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm now going off out. I'll see you tomorrow, sort of, and you never know when you're coming back. So from that point of view, I've sort of built the business around that to enable me to be free to do that because that's what my passion is. Because I'm a lawyer, because I'm very meticulous and very much into things being done right, when I came into search and rescue, there was a lot of things that needed to be done. The constitution was wrong. It was illegal. So I ended up getting that changed. I ended up becoming a trustee quite early on, becoming secretary and sort of revolutionised a lot of the systems using those skills. And we changed the model for what we do for leadership. So originally we'd have people in position for long periods of time and we sort of had an operations lead. And what happened was we ended up getting the wrong people in those positions. So when I joined, some of the people in the positions at the top were doing it for all the wrong reasons. And you get them in every organisation, it's not just charity sector and whatever. You get these people who are doing it for it's about them, One of them, we had an acronym for him, it's called WOC, because he was working on his knighthood. Everything he did was about him and his knighthood. Okay, so that was the acronym we had. And we quite soon on managed to sort of revolutionise the trustee board. Key to that was actually getting Lord Evans, who's the ex-head of MI5, as chair. He came along as a Deputy Lieutenant of Kent to visit us doing an event, and we sort of managed to persuade him to become chairman. And from there, we then sort of revolutionised the trustee board, and then we could revolutionise the actual management. So we now introduce a golf club model where you have a head of unit for 2 years, and then a deputy head of unit who sits underneath them, and then they rotate. So every 2 years. There is a change of leadership at the top to keep things fresh. So I'm actually currently deputy head. I'm going head of unit next year for 2 years. It's interesting because I'm losing a load of trustees at once and a load of management at once. One of our long-standing guys is in the army and he's actually retiring and going up north. Another one of our guys who's 70 and literally wants to hang up his search stuff because he's getting tired of getting woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go out somewhere cold. Don't know what the matter with me is. I love going to dark car parks at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's one of my favourite things in my hobby. And so we've got quite a lot of change coming up and I'm using my skills I've now got, management skills, to actually get a team in place now that I can really trust and depend upon. So they're very interchangeable skills. But it does also mean that KSAR becomes a bit like a job. I've cut back from when I was secretary, but I used to be doing basically 1 day a week was KSAR admin, which is also tough when you're a very small team because they're taking the strain of you not working because you're doing that voluntary thing again. But when you own the business, you can do what you like.
I'm waiting for Sarah to shout. Goes, my boss does stand up for 2 months of the year. So yeah, but it's what you do.
It's what I do, and it's what my passion is. And Pete, who runs my compliance business, I got to know through search and rescue. Really liked his values, and we were talking earlier, people talking about recruitment. We only ever recruit on values now. I don't recruit on skills. Yeah. We've stopped that because it's a nonsense. Because what happens is you get people who don't fit with the team, and they just become corrosive. And it, search and rescue's also taught me that and taught me a lot of those sort of
HR Andy Peters lawyers.
That's it.
So if you want to add H&R,
there we go. Yeah. So that literally is getting the right people is absolutely key for us. So yeah.
So any more questions? Conscious we're running out of time.
Must be something more.
I think no. You've satisfied everybody, Martin. Oh, hang on.
I was married for 10 years and we used to get calls from the police, ambulance service and stuff like that, but I don't think I ever had search and rescue, any interface with search and rescue. Does that ever happen? Because we had a special procedure for Beachy Head as well.
Yeah, so Beachy Head, we've had I think 2 of our despondents have ended up at Beachy Head. Beachy Head now have the chaplains on call. So actually they've actually now got a specialist rota for chaplains who actually work out of Beachy Head or up there. And they do a lot of interventions. So, yeah, we don't generally get involved that much with them. I'm also chair of a thing called KVSEG at the moment, which is another load of acronyms, but the Kent Voluntary Sector Emergency Group, which work alongside the Kent Resilience team. And so if you come away from missing people and go into sort of any sort of emergency response for resilience, flooding, water outage, whatever, any of the charities who are involved in either supporting Blue Lights or the community are involved in this KVSEG meeting. So we have the Salvation Army, we have Rapid Relief, we have the WI, we have RainNet, we have South East 4x4, KSAR, and we can get called to things like water outages. So last July, I was quite happy to sit in my office and get a phone call from the Coast Guard saying, we've got an incident on Sheppey, can you come and give us some command and control? We've got very, very good mapping systems and an IT system that backs up that. So we literally turned up and gave them support, and also ended up giving them volunteers to hand out bottled waters to vulnerable people. And from that, using my commercial skills, we've now got arrangements in place for Southern Water, South East Water, and we're looking at a couple of other water companies as well, whereby as a charity they are now giving us an annual retainer to be on standby for them, and then we're getting a deployment charge as well to go and deliver water to bottled water. So if there's a water outage, rather than using a private commercial company, then they're using the charity sector. It meets their corporate social responsibility, and so it's a win-win.
He stopped. I think it's. We should thank him in the traditional manner. Thank you very much. Young Sarah, come forward. Other young Sarah.
Other young Sarah.
Come on, you stand here.
Here, do I have to be on film?
Yes, you can back a bit,
Steady.
and repeats. Yeah, no. You need to speak up on the microphones, that's why.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
She doesn't trust us.
Oh, no.
I'll let you click that on.
Okay, I will keep it quite brief. So 2 things. Firstly, our very big news is that we 3 weeks ago had planning permission approved for our rebuild project at the hospice. It's been a long time in the pipeline. The planning decision was delayed by several weeks, so that's great news. So it's a £16 million project over 2.5 years. We are going to knock down most of the hospice and rebuild. There's a wing of the hospice which was built in the 90s, so we're going to keep that. But basically the whole place needs updating. We can't hold it together any longer. So that will be kicking off in the next few months. We'll be moving off site. We've got a temporary patient unit which we'll be moving patients to. We've got temporary offices as well for all the sort of back office, fundraising, finance, HR people. And yeah, as I said, £16 million project. We already have 10, excuse me, so we need to raise another 6 million. So that's a big task over the next couple of years. All the while still doing everything that we currently do, looking after patients and their families. So yeah, it's exciting times. The other thing just to talk about is we've got a full schedule of events coming up over the summer. So we've got open gardens, excuse me, open gardens between April and September. We've got music in the park in Farnborough. We have a motor show, various other events.
Walk the wards.
Walk for the wards. Sorry, that was the first thing I forgot. 18th of June is Walk for the Wards on the Hampton estate. We obviously anyone is very welcome to sign up and join in with the events, but we also do look for business sponsors for all of our events. So if you're interested, let me know. If you want to know any more about the Build project and how you can help in any way, then let me know and I can send more information.
And if anybody wants to go to picnics and music in the park, there's a Branston Adams marquee on the Saturday. There might be one on the Sunday, but there's definitely one on the Saturday.
There we go, yeah. It's the first music in the park we've done for several years. So yeah. The last one was pre-COVID, so it's good news that we're back out there doing all of our events again. So.
Can you remember what the music is?
No.
Legends on the Saturday.
Blondie.
Includes Blondie.
It's definitely included, yes.
Yeah, I'm a legend, so I'll be there, yeah. And the Saturday's more sort of soul music.
Yeah. Okay.
I could do your job for you, couldn't
There you go. I'm not involved in organising that. My role is corporate and company.
So the biggest question is, where is Tom?
Where is young Tom? Young Tom is in Portugal for 5 days on a stag do.
That sounds messy.
Well, I'm grateful he hasn't sent us any pictures.
So
the Lord have
yeah,
mercy
I'm
on
sure
his
he's having a lovely time.
I think we're there next month. Do you want to do this, Sarah?
Next month's event will be the 1st of June. We have Rupert Thompson, who's the managing director of the Hogsback Brewery. So I'm sure that will interest most people here. Okay.
Rupert's very good, and I'm sure if we speak to him nicely, we might be able to organise a tour afterwards.
9 o'clock in the morning, a bit early, isn't it?
Well, not by your standards.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I haven't got any standards, you know that.
I think we're done. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to Martin and
Pleasure.